You learn to swallow it before it could reach your throat. The anger, the fear, the loneliness that sits in your chest like a stone. You learn that vulnerability was weakness, that asking for help was failure, that crying was something you outgrew. So you stopped. Stopped reaching out, stopped naming what hurt, and you told yourself this was strength. But here's what no one tells you. The same armor that makes you appear strong is slowly suffocating everything real inside you. You're not broken. You're carrying a psychological burden that started before you could speak. Unwritten rules about what you're allowed to feel, express, and need. Rules enforced by parents, peers, culture, and eventually by you. The paradox? The more successfully you perform stoic, self-reliant masculinity, the more isolated you become. The stronger you appear, the more desperately alone you feel. You were taught that men don't cry, but no one taught you what to do with pain that doesn't evaporate just because you refuse to acknowledge it. So it rewires your nervous system. It becomes depression you don't recognize, anxiety you can't name, and rage that erupts at wrong moments. This is the silent struggle. You're drowning in plain sight, and everyone thinks you're swimming. Part 1. The Psychological Framework. What you're navigating has a name. Normative male alexithymia. Men's culturally reinforced difficulty identifying and expressing emotions. It's not biological. It's learned disconnection from years of conditioning that taught you to suppress and distrust your emotional experience. Dr. Ronald Levant's research shows boys are systematically trained out of emotional literacy from early childhood. While girls are encouraged to name feelings, boys hear, "Toughen up, don't be a baby, shake it off." By adolescence, many males have reduced emotional vocabulary, unable to recognize what they're feeling even when it's overwhelming. Gender role conflict theory by James O'Neill describes the psychological strain when rigid masculine norms conflict with authentic needs. Restrictive emotionality, extreme self-reliance, obsession with achievement, and fear of anything coded as weak. You don't just hide emotions from others, you hide them from yourself. Think of it like this. You've been taught a language with half the words removed, then blamed for not being able to communicate. Masked depression in men often doesn't look like sadness. It looks like irritability, aggression, risk-taking, substance use, or workaholism. Psychologist Terence Real calls this covert depression. You're functional, productive, even successful, but internally you're numb, exhausted, running on fumes and rage. Precarious manhood theory shows masculinity is viewed as social status that must be continually earned and defended. Your identity as a man always feels provisional, under threat, requiring constant proof. You can't just be a man, you must perform manhood. Any vulnerability feels like losing your status entirely, so you perform, relentlessly, until the performance becomes a prison you can't escape even when you're alone. Part 2. The real cost. Let's name what this silence actually costs. Men die by suicide at nearly 4 times the rate of women. Not because they suffer more, but because they suffer silently. Because reaching out feels impossible when you've spent your life learning that pain is shameful or evidence of failure. You're not just isolated from others, you're isolated from yourself. You can't name what you feel half the time, can't trace its origins, can't express it in ways that create connection. So it sits inside you, this unnamed heaviness, and you call it stress or being tired because those are acceptable. But it's grief. It's loneliness. It's accumulated weight from years of pretending you don't need anyone. The core fear, if I show them who I really am, uncertain, afraid, needing support, I will lose everything. Respect, love, my identity itself. So you stay behind the wall. You translate every vulnerable feeling into anger because anger is allowed. You self-medicate with work, alcohol, sex, screens, Anything to avoid the terrifying quiet where you'd face what you've been running from. You've become the guard of your own prison. And you're so good at it that you've forgotten you're also the prisoner. Part 3. How it shows up. In adulthood, this conditioning crystallizes into patterns that look like strength but function as slow self-destruction. You might be the man who can't stop working, who ties worth to productivity, who feels like a failure when resting. Beneath that drive isn't ambition, it's terror that if you stop being useful, you'll have nothing left to offer. In relationships, you become emotionally unavailable without meaning to. Your partner asks what's wrong, and you genuinely don't know. Not because you're hiding it, you've lost access to your inner world. You translate connection into fixing problems, because that's the only language of care you were taught. But intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires emotional literacy you were denied. Male friendships stay surface level. You have buddies you do things with, but no one you actually talk to. No one who knows you're struggling. Because male friendship scripts don't include emotional disclosure. Your anger management becomes chronic. Anger is the only emotion allowed. So every feeling, fear, hurt, disappointment, loneliness, gets funneled through rage. Small things set you off because it's 10,000 unexpressed feelings using the only exit route available. Self-care is non-existent. You ignore pain until it's debilitating. You dismiss mental health as being dramatic. You suffer in silence until your body forces the issue through breakdown. And your sense of self remains underdeveloped. Who are you beyond your roles? Beyond provider, protector, problem solver? You don't know. Because you were taught to do masculinity, not be yourself. But here's the beginning of change. Recognizing these aren't personal failures. They're systematic failures. You didn't create these rules. You inherited them. And inheritance can be refused. Part 4. The path forward. Healing begins with the radical act of naming what you feel. Even badly. Even incompletely. Develop emotional literacy. Start basic. Mad, sad, glad, scared. When triggered, pause and ask, which category? You're building the muscle of self-awareness that was systematically atrophied. This isn't soft. This is survival. Seek therapy with male-affirming practitioners. Find therapists who understand masculine conditioning without pathologizing masculinity itself. This isn't about becoming more feminine. It's about becoming more whole. Build authentic male connection. Find or create spaces where men practice vulnerability together. You need to witness other men struggling, expressing doubt, asking for help, and remaining men. You need proof that vulnerability doesn't equal weakness. Redefine strength. Real strength isn't suppression. It's capacity. To feel difficult things without being destroyed. To ask for help without shame. To admit uncertainty without collapse. You've been performing brittle strength. True strength is flexible, adaptive, connected. Permission to be imperfect. You don't have to have it figured out. You're allowed to be tired, confused, overwhelmed. You're allowed to need. Masculinity doesn't require invulnerability. That's mythology, and it's killing you. Brené Brown said, "Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome." That's the work. Showing up to your own life, your own feelings, your own needs. Not as failure, but as the most courageous thing you'll ever do. The world taught you that silence was strength, but silence is just slow erasure. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. You were never supposed to. Strength isn't the absence of struggle. It's the willingness to name it. So subscribe.